You're listening to Creative Campfire, where creatives like you come to talk shop, share stories, and light the path for one another. Whether you're here to learn, grow, or feel a little less alone, welcome to the fire. We're going to talk about usage, and we got a listener question, or I should say we got a newsletter person to write in.
Love it.
She wrote us a great little thing to think about. So this is what she had to say. She said, curious about your reflections on our ability to license being limited by certain markets and or competition within those markets. Example, another photographer doesn't charge for licensing. So businesses that can and probably should pay for it, in some cases, are unwilling to work with competing local photographers who license their works. Thought on navigating this, especially when it's hard to find work. And she does give us some context to this background. Do you want the context, Lauren, or do you just want to respond?
Context.
All right. The context is, I'm new to running my food photography business. Ooh, food photographer. Ooh, we love food photographers. Last year, I met with a local restaurant group who wanted full buyout licensing. I did a bit of research and the price was pretty high, but I went with it. I think she means her price, what she was pricing it at was pretty high. They ended up going with another photographer. And so I asked if they could share what they paid. It was a fraction of what I had quoted at the lowest tier, with whatever licensing they wanted included. This was a learning for me on several fronts, one being that I was way overpriced myself for the market I'm in, which I'm a little embarrassed about, but it was also a good first data point. I also recognize that aligning on budget earlier would have helped me avoid this as well. But that aside, it still leaves me wondering about licensing in my local market. If a local businesses will agree to it if other competing photographers aren't charging for it. Or said another way, is the amount I can charge for licensing partly driven by what my peers are or aren't charging? My hypothesis has been yes, and that there may be ways to price around this that are still competitive and acceptable for me. But at the same time, it could be not being able to charge it all in certain food business communities where I live. She's like, I'm not totally against this, just trying to strategize my business approach accordingly. So I think there's a few pieces to pull apart here.
So much. I love this question.
And so one, I know that you personally have had a lot of experience with restaurant groups, which is going to be great insight for her. But two, I want to pull apart. There's one particular piece in here that she says, and unfortunately we can't talk with Tara, but she says, to align on budget earlier would have helped her. And so that one question is makes me wonder, did you ask the question of, do you have a budget? And what budget are you trying to stay within? Number two is I wonder what that upfront conversation was with the restaurant group. Was there a conversation around hey, we want X number of dishes shot. We're looking for this turnaround time. Is it a restaurant that does seasonal menus? Are they changing? How often are they changing up that menu? Or is it more something I would think of an Applebee's, right? It could still be a local style, family owned style of Applebee's where it's the menu is always the same. And then maybe they have that one special, because if you're always going to have the BLT and the cheeseburger and whatever I don't know, something else a spaghetti on your menu, once you shoot that, it's going to kind of live forever. You're not really changing it up a whole lot. You might change your tableware. You might change the scene a little bit, but those might be images that might actually live forever versus if you really are a farm to table seasonal menu, you're changing that menu every few weeks. And so a lot of those questions really help you figure out, one, what is really the life of that photo? And two, if you are working really with a truly local business, you and I have talked about this, you're baking that usage into your creative fee. You don't necessarily line item it out. You might say, if you want to license other photos beyond what we've packaged, it's X dollars. And that way you're actually giving a value to every image that's in your, over and beyond. And therefore, if there's ever a problem with copyright, you actually have assigned a value, which will hold up better in court. Just FYI.
Wait, you were saying that last piece about there being a value that holds up in court, you feel like that's applicable to having it separate
It could be separate or baked in, but you should have a line that says like, oh, for each additional images or images beyond this point will be X dollars.
Okay. All right. Agreed.
Right. So
Yes.
let's say
wanted to
like
make
you're
sure I
shooting.
was-
Yeah.
Yeah.
You shoot, let's say 4 images per plate, but you're really only licensing, a horizontal and a vertical, and the other 2 are kind of just extra. As like, oh, they're going to see the gallery and they might say, yeah, we want all 4. And then you're like, okay, well, you only got, I don't know, 12 images and you picked out 20. The 8 additional images cost X.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Thank you, Tara. In general, when commercial photographers start talking about licensing, I tend to get a little bit quiet because I feel like it is a lot more complicated than photographers want to believe, especially commercial photographers who have done really big national campaigns or have worked with reps and all of that. Like, especially when it comes to local businesses, mid-sized, small businesses, sometimes even national brands. It just depends because things just aren't always what we assume they are. And the more that you do work with these companies and build a relationship with them and get to kind of see behind the curtain, the more you understand the reality of they're not just sitting, like the people who get to decide to hire you aren't just like sitting on bags of money trying to keep it from you. You know what I mean? Especially the weirder the economy gets and the world is on fire and it's freaking everybody out. Like it's complicated. And so I think we as photographers need to be a little less assuming the worst of clients. I think we need to be a little more curious and open to what works for everybody and a little more focused on the goal of like, I mean, personally, because this is 100% all that I do, all I do to make money is take photos and videos. I want to make sure that I pay my bills. And so, if a project that I really like I want to come to a place that like works for both of us. I'm also don't want to get like, I don't want to get like crazy taken advantage of or devalue what we do, but I'm also trying to find a compromise between my ideal and, what they need and what they can afford. So I'm a little more focused on that than like, oh, if you can't pay this ideal rate, then like, I'm just going to say no. Like, I don't know what, like, let's talk a little. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'll say is about, what you said about the budget. I'm going to assume that she asked. I mean, definitely, if you're not thinking about asking, just ask. Do you have a budget in mind? Do you have a range in mind? I always go back to what I heard Andrea Stern share once, which was that one of her approaches in trying to like walk that fine line around like getting to numbers, but knowing that she might not get an exact one is like, are you thinking 10 to 20? Are you thinking 20 to 30? I'm just trying to give ranges or like above or below this. Sometimes you'll get a little closer to an idea of what someone's thinking than if you just ask them to give you a number. Even if they have one. And so I will say that it's really hard to get people to give you a number, even if you ask. I ask all the time, and people just, regardless of whether they're with a major worldwide brand or they're a local business. Actually, more often a local business kind of knows. But it's just hard to get a clear answer on that.
Yeah, I was going to say the idea about the range is a great one because you can even say like, well, if they point stuff out in your portfolio that they like that you did, you can then say to them, well, that actually started around this amount of money. And then that gives them like, for me to execute that shoot that you saw that you liked was X dollars. Is that what you were thinking? And then they immediately go like, oh, or they're like, oh yeah. It's like, what is that reaction? Is it like or is it, yeah, of course. Like,
right. Exactly. And, you can also give people some, give the client some context on, listen, your budget, it's not just about like me and what I'm going to make. It's around like what kind of resources am I going to have based on your budget in order to execute this at a certain level, right? So if you want something that looks like, you know, a Burger King ad, well, there was for sure a food stylist and like there were all kinds of people involved in that. It wasn't just like a photographer and their camera showing up and that's it. So, you know, that there's a difference there in like, what are you really going for? What's your goals? It's really important, I think, to get, like it's really helpful for this budget conversation to get some kind of creative inspiration or like, show me what you're going for here. You know, what's the look and feel you have in mind? And then you can see like, oh, are they going for something that's a little more, you know, natural light, you know, lifestyle, slice of life, or are they going for heavily produced?
Super polished.
Yeah. If you've got 50 products you need shot and they all have a different set, you know, background, and you've got like, then we're talking about a very different thing. So, you know, it's helpful to have a more educating conversation the more context you have before you even start to talk about budget, because then you can help them understand, you know, why it matters, why you need to know, all that jazz. So, yeah.
I do think that also leans into like, it leans into getting into the usage conversation, because like, if you know what that mood board is, if you know the style that you're going for, you know the number of images roughly you're trying to hit, and you know where those images then are living, which is part of that usage conversation, then you can start to have a better, right? You're starting to build the context and the fill in the blanks, right? You're starting to fill in those blanks. And then you could say like, okay, so this is really for your website. This is really for social. Oh, you're going to do some social ads. Okay, so you want this to expand beyond whatever your regular reach is. You're trying to pull in some new people. If it's local, you know, their reach is still relatively small compared to like, you know, if this was like a national ad or an editorial or an advertorial, or, you know, are they doing like mailing postcards? Are they doing an email thing? Is this going to live like on their POS? That's point of sales for those that don't know, right? Are you going to put this on like your DoorDash or your Just Eats app as part of your photo campaign? Because that means that more people are going to see it. And it just gives you a further idea of where those possibilities are that your image is going to show up. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to charge additional usage for that stuff, especially at this local level. And I do think that there is kind of this rough tier that's kind of untalked about or unspoken. Back in the day when you used to be able to get onto Getty Calculator, you can't anymore. Getty Calculator is pretty much a dead thing. But it doesn't really matter because Getty Calculator was like outrageous. It was
I agree.
so obnoxiously like outlandish.
I agree.
But there used to be kind of like this like percentage of things where you'd be like, okay, the Getty Calculator gives me, you know, it tells me that this image is worth, you know, $100,000. And then you'd be like, okay, I'm going to take 40% of that for a national ad. I'm going to take, you know, whatever. And then you would like break it down like 40%, 20%, 10%, like 5%. And so you can think about that when you think of usage. Joni Simon has talked about this in some of her paid classes back in the day. If you have photo quote, which starts with an F, not a PH, that actually could give you some ideas around like how to price your usage. But when we're talking local groups, like you're talking a local restaurant group, but the question in that local restaurant group is a one-off restaurant within this restaurant group, or is it really like a chain of the same restaurants within that restaurant group? So that's the first question, because if it's going to show up at multiple restaurants, that image is worth more money. If it is like just that one-off group, it's a one-off. Like there's really, you know, how many potential people are going to eat there in a given night, over a week, over a month, over a quarter, over a year. Like the percentage of people is very, very small. And so that's where that percentage thing can really help you to think about like, oh, am I taking 100% of it? Am I taking 50% of it? Am I taking 20% of it? Am I taking 10%? And that's when you kind of like bake it into that line item where you're saying like, okay, well, for me to go out and shoot this, I'm going to use some really simple numbers here. I'm not suggesting that this should be your numbers. These are not based on any real numbers. This is a disclaimer. So say you're going to go out and you're going to shoot this thing, and you're like, okay, it cost me $2,000 to go out and do this. I'm going to go out. My package includes, let's just say, I don't know, 15 plates and 5 drinks. And I'm going to go out and and maybe you do whatever, some staff portraits and 1 or 2 pictures of interiors for them. So like all in all, maybe there's like 20 pictures that you're going to license, right, to them. And that license may be not like, there's no separate line item. It's like, it's part of that $2,000. And then maybe you have a fee for your equipment or your insurance. And at the end of the day, you might have like a little line item for, your back end, your to process the images. So at the end, maybe you come out with $2,500, let's say. That's all included. And then you would have a line item that says, any additional images on top of this is whatever, $150 an image. And therefore they go, oh, okay, well, great. We like these 10 additional images. Okay, great. You just made another $1,500 on top of, your $2,500. So for locals, like that is, I think, a very easy way to not have to line item it out, but it is baked in, and you need to specify that this is your creative fee and it includes the usage license for whatever that usage license is that you're doing. It could be, I think you do perpetual, Lauren, for most of your local, super local restaurant groups, because the usage is really only like maybe 6 months.
Well, it depends, right? Like, this is the other thing I can like really go into. There's definitely, you're always going to have a difference between like local or regional and then like national and global. And even then it's not always exactly what you think it's going to be. But for sure, if you're trying to put usage, I don't care if it's 6 months, a year, 5 years, whatever, that is my experience, is that freaks out like small business owners, because now they're worried about, okay, well, like now I have to worry about like keeping on top of that. And if I'm not using it. And to me, it's just like unnecessary because they're growing and changing. If it's a restaurant we're talking about, their menu is going to change. Their branding is probably going to elevate at some point, like for all the things. And also at the end of the day, restaurants are just operating on wildly thin margins. And that's even before COVID, but especially, now that's just real. I literally just had a meeting with a chef who owns 2 restaurants, 2 or 3, I think 2. They had a third, they had to close it. But they have 2, restaurants that are going great. One of them more so than the other, because one of them is also a wine bar, and wine is apparently like not doing as well in general. Yeah. It's a bummer. I had a really great chat with him. He was really transparent about like, this one restaurant like does great, whatever, this other one, it's struggling a little more because of this. And, just again, talking about like the margins, better at the other one, but in general, they're just not great. So, and I've heard every kind of restaurant say that. So it's just the reality of it. So every investment they make really matters. And to me, it's just an unnecessary stress point. So yeah, in perpetuity, you can use it now, like use it how you need it. I want to make sure that, my time and, talent are compensated in a way that feels fair and feels doable for them. But that being said, you still get people with like insane expectations. So like I had a really great call with someone who like owns like a franchise of, I think probably at least a regional brand. I don't really know. I'm not going to say it on here, but I'll ask you later if you've heard of it. I've definitely seen multiple like in Georgia. So I know that much, but they're a franchise owner, and I guess like they had someone shoot their food. They were really unhappy with the images, so they were very motivated. Like, we really want to have great images. They're for our website, for our menu. They're going to be in the restaurant, and they're going to be on like the ordering apps and stuff. Cool. Okay. And I think that they had like I mean, when we were actually, he didn't even come to the meeting with like an exact number of dishes. I was like, okay. So he was trying to go through the menu and be like, it was basically everything on the menu. And it was like, it was probably 40 or 50 items. It was a lot. But I mean, whatever, compared to, you know, some of the stadium stuff, like I can knock that out, you know, in a day. If we're very well organized and I have help.
Or two. Huh? I said or two.
Or two. Two is better. Anyways, you know, so I'm like, okay, I can't remember what I quoted him, but knowing that he's like, you know, he was a franchisee, so he's not talking about, he doesn't have like their, you know, corporate budget. He's got his budget. And I can't even remember. It was for sure at least, I don't even know. It was probably 25, 3,500, something like that. I can't remember exactly. And I didn't hear back from him, and he came back, and I followed up, and I was like, hey, are you still want to do this? Because he was also kind of under a time crunch. And he came back and said, yeah, you know, I'd really love to work with you. Your work is amazing, but that's definitely on my budget. I was really, you know, I found another photographer who was going to do it for $750. And I was like, $750? I mean,
for 50 dishes? You're insane.
It's just too much. That's for sure probably your whole day to do that.
No, it's a very
your
full
whole
day.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, it is your whole day. It's potentially 2 days. It's so much.
And
work.
then you have to process the back end, which is a minimum of at least a day, if not 2 days.
Exactly. So I was like, I don't know what that person, like, I can't imagine. They've got to be. I hope they're a student, just happy to get the portfolio work and feeling like at least they got something instead of having to do it for free to get portfolio work. I have no idea, but for sure, that doesn't really tell me that you're getting someone who's going to give you the elevated look you were looking for, unless, again, you won the student jackpot. Like,
yeah, and I think there is something about, you know, there is too low, right? Like
yes.
it has to make sense for you.
Correct.
And so to Tara's thing here about, you know, that she didn't win the job and they went with a lower priced photographer, part of it is like you might not be able to do it for a lower price. Absolutely. Even though you might need the work. Like in this case, this is dramatic, right? Like you're quoting, you know, $3,000-$4,000 to do this shoot because you know what it takes, you know what to look for, you know how to plate, know like when to tell the chef like, hey, I'm ready for the next thing or whatever. Whereas someone who's going to come in and do it at $751, it tells me, wow, those numbers are really far apart. So if I was like the restaurant owner, I'd be like, wait a second, like
truly,
what's going on here? Like that is less than a fourth of what you were quoting, you know, what I was just quoted. And I might need to go get a third party in there just to like see like where in the sea of things are, because just because it's the cheapest thing doesn't mean it's the best thing.
Right. And I wish that all business owners or people who are making these decisions thought that way, but they just don't. I mean,
here's the reality, right? A lot of this works in wine as well. I think wine is a really great example because I would shoot for a lot of wineries and they would want these like 3 to 5 year license deals. And I say, but don't you have a new vintage every year? Isn't there a new label on that bottle? We're going to shoot next year, right? Like, are you going to use marketing from this campaign next year when we've shot the new stuff? And they're like, no. And I said, then don't license it for longer than you need. Yeah. Like, unless there's an amazing hero photo that's going to like live on for a while, like there's no need for you to pay for all of this extra stuff when you don't need it. And then the other thing coming off of the conversation I had this week with the travel photographer friend of mine is that you don't know where these photos can go and how much legs they can actually have if you so desire to look for that. So for instance, like he shot this project back in 2012 and it was a walk in Spain, right? It's the famous like pilgrimage walk in Spain. And like he's still licensing those photos today. So like they just got picked up and were published in a book. And then he had another magazine that just did a thing on the walk, on the pilgrimage, and then they licensed a few of his photos. They've been in Nat Geo. He has them on his website, and so he's like, this is a situation where like I didn't expect this project to live very long, but here we are 12 years on, and I'm still licensing these photos out for different books and different publications and lectures and maps and things like that. And so this is something to think about where like you can structure it where you could say, yeah, you could have in perpetuity, just know after whatever, a year, they go to non-exclusive. So if it's a picture of a steak, it's a picture of a steak, right? Obviously, if the person's product is in it, you're not going to relicense that. So there are ways to give people exclusive usage, have it go non-exclusive. So then if you did want to like sell it somewhere else or have the opportunity to sell it somewhere else, that you could.
Right. And it also, I mean, the reason I do like something like that, where it's a little less stressful, I think, for the business owner to worry about this like timestamp, but gives you, the creator, some flexibility, is that it gives you like a bargaining chip that makes sense and isn't devaluing your work, right? So it's like, if you quoted something for 5,000 and they're like, we only have 3,000. You're like, cool. Okay. Well, 3,000, then, you have a shorter amount of time where it's exclusive to you or, something like that. So that's more about, like you said, the legs it can have versus, you're not saying anything different about, your creative ability. You're just like, cool. Then like other people get this. It's not just yours.
I mean, I think to your point, like usage has these different levers you can pull.
Right.
And, if it's like a local thing, then you're going to build something out, you're going to offer it up to them. And if they're open for negotiation or if they freak the F out, then you're going to, you can change those levers. You can change the way you package it. And I do think that there's a time and a place where you package it one way versus packaging it another way. For instance, like our good friend Finette, when she moved from the United States to France, there's a huge change in the market. Like there's a huge different way that people think about things. She was always about pricing per project. Like I'm going to give you that custom quote based on that project. And then when she got to France, she realized that doesn't fly here. Like people don't want to come back to me. I just need to have a package that says I could do 2 hours, 4 hours, or a full day. And then she realized I never want to offer a full day. So I'm now offering for 2 hours, you get this at this rate. 4 hours, you get this at this rate. And that works really, really well for her local market there. And that might be something, if you are going after like your local market, that is a place where you having some kind of package or touchstone of like, it starts at X and includes these things might be an easier sell.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So that was a note that I made, was just getting to know your local market and, try to have conversations with other photographers, try to get to know, some other business owners and just see what they've invested and what that's like. And some of it is just trial and error, and you kind of find out through, you win some, you lose some, and you kind of learn as you go through what your local market is really gonna, sustain. But also you're just going to end up with people who are unreasonable sometimes, and there's nothing you can do about it. And unless you're just like super jazzed about that and you really need it for your portfolio and you want to make it worth it for some other reason. But at the end of the day, it takes a little bit of that like time and taking some wins and losses to learn it. But something that she had mentioned off the top that I wanted to touch on, in the very beginning, she talks about researching pricing, and that being what she went off of for her initial quote. She saw what somebody else, like she found some resource that said something about pricing, and then that was how she came up with her estimate. And that you have to be really careful about, because if you find a resource or an example of someone's pricing, and like I'm in Atlanta, if I look at pricing for, I don't know, a photographer that's in LA or New York or, what have you, doing, let's assume it's the same level of business. Well, still, the fact that they're in a different market, like that might mean that there's a different expectation on what people charge, compared to Atlanta. But also, most especially, is like I'm very curious what it was that she was referring to and basing her pricing off of, because if you're listening, if you listen to a podcast and reps are talking about a job that they got their photographer a $60,000 creative fee, for a 3-day shoot for I don't know, or for a 2-day shoot for like Weight Watchers or something, food, and you're quoting a local business or even like a regional one, like even a hospitality group. I work with hospitality groups, still not going to be throwing down 60 grand on like, on a menu update, most likely. So, it's like the context and making sure like you have to always filter the research you're doing through the context of your specific client, where they're at, all those things. And that's it's just going to give you a better starting point. It's, there is no cut and dry, one size fits all answer, unfortunately, but we can get a little bit closer. Yeah. That
and I think, I think on top of that, it's also a matter of like, what are your numbers? What does it cost you to live your life and run your business?
Yes.
And more than anything, I think that personally, that's where I would start, is like, what does it cost for you to do what it is that you need to do? And on average, like, even if you're, new to this, you could say, okay, I could see doing, I don't know, 6 shoots a month. Okay, well, your monthly bills cost what? And then how much do you need to gross, how much do you need to net at the end of that to pay your bills, and then put some money away and pay your business, right. And also pay taxes. Don't forget about taxes. And if you're, all that.
Highly recommend the book Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. If you're trying to figure out sort of how to take what you need to make and translate that into how you price through your business. Because if you have a business, just because I personally need to make, let's say I personally need to make, $10,000 a month, that is not what my business needs to make. My business needs to make 20 probably. So I really like that book for how it just simplifies doing that math. If you're not a finance degree person like Shelly Waldman here.
No, I agree. I love Profit First too. I think the way that he breaks it down is a very simple. I think it's really hard when you're in a new market and you don't know what the market bears, because you can come up with whatever your numbers is, right? Like I could do Profit First. I could figure out what my numbers are or what I need to make. And then I could be like, yeah, that's what I need to make. I'm going to go charge on out into my new market and say like, I need to make that amount of money, but my market doesn't bear that. My market might be lower than that. And that's where that research of like, talking to other people and talking to people. And that's one of the things I had to learn firsthand moving to London.
Oh,
because
I know.
That's been wild. What I make in the States and what I make here. And when I say the States, San Francisco Bay Area is where I do most of my photography. What I make there and what I make here is night and day. I make 30% of what I make in the States. And so, and I had to learn, like I have a buddy who was coming up and he was fairly new to photography here. And I was watching like how he was pricing and what he was pricing it as, and being like, oh my God, it's so much lower. Like it's so much lower. But like when we actually sat down and had a really great conversation around his rationale and how he came to that and where he's at. And now fast forward 2.5, 3 years, right? Like he's cooking with gas now, right? He's got consistent clients coming in. He's raised his rates a teeny tiny bit, like not a lot. And I'm like, dude, you have a kid on the way. Like you need to like increase that number just a little bit more. But he prices like a kind of an all-encompassing number per day that he works on it. So he charges the same amount of money for like a pre-production day, a shoot day, and a post day. And so let's just say like whatever. We'll just say it's like $1,000 a day. I actually not exactly sure where his numbers land right now, but so at the end of it, that's $3,000. And that's just how he chooses to price it. So even though his pre-production might only be a few hours or half a day, and his post might be, well, sometimes his post is like 4 days, depending on how complicated it is. But he tends to not go back and charge the client for those extra days. So, but it is a way for him to easily gauge, like, he just did like a product shoot and a lifestyle shoot. And he was like, okay, so I know the product is going to be 1 day shoot in my studio. I know that it's like I can do whatever 5-6 images in a day. So it's one post day for that. Then it's a lifestyle day and it's going to take me 2 post days for that. And then I need 2 pre-production days. So, right. So he had 2 shoot days, 2 pre-production days, and 3 post days. Well, that's $7,000. Because it's just like, that's just how he does his math now. So you can come up with a way that works for you and what those numbers include.
I do love the simplicity of that. In general, it just makes my life easier, right? And that is something that I just am kind of always playing with, especially when it comes to the more like local business things, is just what's something that is going to be simple for them to receive. Like the way that we like to break out line items for things, which is how they want it for producers, for really big jobs. Like they want to see all the nitty gritty. A local business, not so much, because especially if they're it's overwhelming. If they're being price shoppy, yes, it's overwhelming. And if they're being price shoppy, then they might see your line item for your assistant and be like, well, I mean, do you really need an assistant? Because like I can help you. I'm like, cool. Or do you have experience being a photo assistant or a photographer? Like you're not actually going to be that helpful to me. I hate to break it to you. So deciding like what are your non-negotiables, and probably just like some of that, I think the most important things, going back to what you said earlier, the most important thing is to define, no matter how concise you're trying to make your invoice, define what those deliverables are. Like, what does that mean that they are getting in the end, and the terms of the usage. So as long as you have that specified, and including if the scope expands in any way, if it's more time than you all agreed to, if it's more deliverables than you all agreed to, then what? Having that then what there is super important, because A, it'll just save you a lot of back and forth arguing if it does happen. And B, I personally value that because it decreases my anxiety. Because I don't want to have that conversation the day of and we haven't talked about it before and worry about how they're going to respond to that. I've been in that situation where I had a crazy day of like shooting lifestyle stuff for a hair brand, a hair products brand. And it went way over scope, like almost immediately. That was that moment where I was like, I need to be so specific about scope and what happens if we go beyond scope up front, because I just would have felt less nervous. It would have empowered me to be like, cool, well, like we talked about in this agreement, in your invoice, here's what happens now. I'm just going to feel better about that. So I love doing that. And like we've learned together, Shelly, when we've worked on jobs together, it also gives you opportunity to make more money. And we like that. When they want to increase,
we do indeed.
We like that. We like when they're so happy they want to add more things. And I'm trying to be better about that, because historically, this is bad, I know, you can learn from my mistakes. Historically, I am like, I just want to give everything worth looking at, and I'm just going to throw it in there and not worry about it because I want to over deliver. And I like to over deliver, but you can do both. You can over deliver
and get paid for
exactly, and get paid for it. So you could say, cool, for this amount of money, you're getting these 20 things, but I might deliver 50, and that's giving you more to choose from. And that is still over delivering. And it's just going to also honor the effort that you put into giving them those extra things. Like, that's just like fair for everybody. It's not about taking advantage of everybody.
That's literally what is going to come out of the shoot I just did, which was a 3-day shoot. And we did product on day 1 and lifestyle on day 2 and 3. And on day 2 and 3, I think my deliverables are 20 images a day. And shooting lifestyle, like a small little variation is like a second shot. So and I overshot. There is no question. Like, I don't want to overwhelm my client. Yeah. But to your point, right, I will over deliver. I will probably give anywhere, but if I could do a really, really good cool down, it will be 60 images a day. And then he can pick his 20. And if he wants more, then awesome. More money in my pocket.
Yeah, that's the part I hate having to like choose. I mean, there's some of it that's easy. Like, I will probably call out at least half of what I shoot. But then that's still going to be probably 3 times as much as I'm supposed to deliver. And I don't want to make those choices. I'd rather just say like, here's everything I made and I love them all, and now you pick, because I don't want to, because I don't know what you're, in the end, I know what we were going for, but the thing that you might be the most excited about might be different than what I'm most excited about. And as long as you're excited about something, I don't care. So I don't want to make those choices. Don't like to.
Yeah. I mean, the client did say to me, like, gee, there's a lot of really great shots that we got today. What I would love is for you to give me your top like 10. Like, you tell me, here's your top, here's the Shelly picks of day 1 and day 2,
mm-hmm.
and then deliver the bigger gallery. And that way he has something to kind of guide him.
We had that happen with the project we did at the end of last year. They were like, oh, you pick some. And I was like, oh, Shelly, what do I do?
Right. Well, they originally said, like, the middle producer, basically the agency was like, no, I will pick the images. And then at the end of the day, they were like, no, Lauren, can you pick the images? And you were like, ugh.
Hell no. And I don't even actually remember what we did. I think the producer ended up.
The agency.
Yeah.
The agency ended up picking them.
She was cool. I appreciated her.
Yeah. I mean, because there was a lot over those 3 days. 3 days.
Yeah. I loved those images.
Right?
I still love those images. So I feel like a nice way to like land this plane is a question for you. And maybe this is good food for thought when this happens to other people. So going back to the very unrealistic potential client that I talked with, right? Who wanted the moon for the size of a rock in my backyard. I'm wondering if it's worth going back to them and one, being like, hey, did you ever reshoot your menu? How'd it go? Happy with those images?
Yeah.
That's my first thing I'm curious about. And regardless, let's say they didn't, and they're still like, yeah, like we still need to do it, but I'm still working with like $750 to $1,000. Like, is it worth it to say, like, let's just say it's still $750. Let's say if we go with saying that each of those items that he gets to pick one photo for each, but his deliverables for that is he's going to get, like, each photo is going to cost, let's even if we went with $50. So that means he has to pick his top 15 dishes. Not 50.
So one of the ways that I would approach it, that I learned from my cousin, who was a CEO and a CFO of a very large restaurant chain in the US, was when they went to go do photo shoots, they purposely focused on photograph. I mean, they had a massive menu. The things that they focused on photographing were their most profitable dishes.
Right. Exactly.
So not the most popular ordered.
Right.
The most profitable dishes. So his advice to me was like, when you go and you approach like these big chains or restaurants or whatever, even your restaurant group, and they have a very limited budget, you could say, well, let's just focus on your most profitable dishes. What's your top 10 profitable dishes?
Right.
And if they're like, well, really, we make the most money off of these 7, then you could say, okay, well, let's fill in the last 3 with your most popular dishes. And if it intersects, like, fantastic, maybe dish 5, 6, and 7 are the most popular dishes, and it just also happens to be the most profitable and the most popular. But that's when then you could say, like, well, what's the chef's favorite dishes besides these 7? Let's shoot those next 3. So I do think that's one way that you could take a menu that's 30, 50 items, you're talking like Cheesecake Factory menu, and like really boiling it down to those top, like the top hero dishes that they really want to push because they make the most money on them.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's my curiosity. Is like, if we can at least get above like a get out of bed price, right? Like, even if I'm doing a 20-minute headshot session, like a, mini, those are like, started like $450 at least, you know what I mean? So like,
yeah, but I mean, doing a headshot session where you're like, okay, I have 20 minutes, we're going to show up here, I'm going to shoot natural light, and I'm it's way different than doing plated in a restaurant. Like, I think
about my get out of bed for specifically food, because I never have to, but it would be good to think about.
Because I mean, there's just a lot of nuance that goes into that.
That's very true.
Right? Where like, if you're going to show up and shoot food and like, you get a plate of food in front of you that might be appetizing to eat, but not appetizing for the camera.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to sit there and you're going to turn it and rotate it and be like, hey, do you have like some fresh X, Y, and Z? Do you have this? Do you have that? Or you're bringing your mini toolkit with you to make it look plump and delicious and blah, 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 and make it camera ready. And so, yeah, you know, could you shoot for 2-3 hours or maybe even 4 hours and get like really 10 beautiful dishes done? Yeah. I mean, you probably could do it in 2 hours if it's really plated well and it's actually specifically plated for camera. Then you could do that pretty fast, especially if it's one if it's a one setup.
Yeah,
you know, you're doing one surface, one location, one place setting. Then it can go pretty quickly,
right?
And you have hands, right? So. But
so that
they're like, I mean, there's just a lot of like
no, I
things
know,
to consider.
but I'm just saying that's like an interesting way to think about, because you know, and I just kind of thought about this in this conversation. Is like, is there a way to say something like, assuming that it's like, okay, well, it's not like I wouldn't do some kind of shoot for $750 for like a local business, but it's just not going to be your whole menu of 40-50 things for sure. But can we start with like 10 to 15 of your top ones, and then you get to pick those specific 10 to 15. If you want more than one angle or like some varieties, like a variety of like different things
you might
per
do
dish, because I'm probably going to still like overshoot a little bit, then you'll pay extra for those. And then maybe it becomes a series of shooting where you actually do end up getting closer to what you would have charged if you'd done it all in 1 or 2 days, but you're breaking it up in a way that's a little more doable for that business owner. So it just goes back to the like finding how it works for everybody. So that's just my curiosity.
I mean, you could,
it's like, is it worth?
You could break it up and you could say like, to your point of like thin profit margins.
Yeah.
You could say, well, like instead of this outlay all going at once, like what if we broke this up over 4 shoots and like using your number of, let's say it was, I don't know, whatever it was, $4,000, and you're doing 4 shoots. Well, if you're doing 4 shoots, it might actually have to be like $10.50 a shoot for you, because doing it all in one go is a lot easier and cheaper in bulk than it is to like go out each time and do it all over again.
Definitely.
But you would be like, okay, so I will do this in like 2-hour increments. I'll come out. We're going to shoot 10 dishes every time I come. We're going to do this over 4, whatever. We'll do it over 4 weeks, or we could do it over 8 weeks, like every other week. And like, would that be better for you from a money cash flow standpoint? Or you just go back to, well, for $1,000, here's what I could do.
Just interesting. These are things we just constantly are thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, there's been some really interesting discussion on the usage front on our Instagram feed, and particularly in the DMs, but there's also been some really great stuff just in the Creative Camp comments. So like we were talking about raw files this past week. We also talked about buyout on the post before that, but if I go to just like to close this out, there's one note that I wanted to read, which was from my friend Chris. Chris has one too, but this one's from Ryan. And Ryan is a lifestyle outdoor photographer in Colorado. And one of the things that he mentioned in here was we were talking about raw files, and like, do you give the raw files? Do you renegotiate it? Because most of the time when you write your contract is for edited deliverables. It's not it's for like finished images. It's not necessarily for the raw file. And so he said he still negotiates on raw images. But one of the things he talks about here that I just wanted to point out on the podcast was, if this is happening, if someone is coming back to you and asking for raws after the fact, right? Yeah. Typically people will talk about raw files beforehand.
Yes.
But if they're coming back to you after the fact, it's likely one of 2 things. And he says, 1, the client doesn't really understand the process, and it's our job as photographers to explain it to them and try to solve their problem. And number two, the client is unhappy with some part of the process, and it's our job to understand what that is and try to solve their problem. And so, right. And I think this really gets into whether this is raw files or this is usage. It is our job to help the client understand. It is our job to solve that problem. It's our job to educate them. Remember, we are the experts when doing our craft. They don't know this world. They may never have worked with a professional photographer before. They may have never worked with a professional food photographer before or a commercial photographer before. And so if they hire someone who is like a family kids portrait photographer or a wedding photographer, hey, I had that happen. I worked with a soap brand. They'd never worked with a photographer before. They didn't want to pay me for the licensing. They didn't want to really pay me pretty much anything. And then they're like, oh, well, we're going to get my daughter's wedding photographer to do this for $400. And the reality was like that wedding photographer has no knowledge of the brand side and really what they were offering to do for a very, very low rate.
I should say highly possible. I feel bad about the way I reacted to that because, I mean, I shot weddings for a long time in the beginning, but unlikely if that's all they've ever done and all they do and they haven't dipped their toe into the world of commercial, then yeah, that can be very problematic.
So I'm just saying, like, this is where we have to be the ones that educate the client. So like if the restaurant is coming back to Tara and saying like, oh my God, like I'm not paying for usage. And then you could say, well, whether you know that you're paying for it or not, there is a usage fee.
You're always paying for usage.
You're always paying for usage because like I took the photo, I have to license it to you.
Yeah.
So whether I'm telling you that license is baked into the rate, or if I'm telling you that license is on top of that rate, you're still like, I still have to give you the right to use the image.
Right.
And this is where we get back to like, how do you explain it when people don't understand it? So this is also on the Instagram if you need to reference this. Two really great examples. One is going to the movies, right? If you buy a ticket to go to the movies, and I use this because Lauren goes to the movies all the time. If you buy a ticket to go to the movies, guess what you have? You have a usage license to go see that movie for one time. You cannot record it. You cannot take it home. That's it. It's a one-time viewing opportunity.
Yep.
Okay. Number two is for those that have a Spotify account, right? Or a Pandora account, like a SiriusXM account. Okay. If you have a streaming music account, Apple Music is also in there. You are paying a usage license to that service to be able to listen to music. And more than likely, you have a consumer account, which means you can listen to it for your personal usage only. You can listen to your car, your home, on your walks, things like that. But if you have a storefront,
yes,
and you play the playlist on your storefront, technically you're in violation of that license because that's a commercial use.
Yep. And
furthermore, you can't take that music and put it in like a promotional video. You can't use that to promote your work. You can't put that in a movie or anything like that you make money.
That is
a different license.
If you even take a video for social on your phone and the music is playing in the background, probably it's supposed to happen. It's happened to me a couple of times, right? Where like
you get flagged.
Instagram or whatever will flag and be like, yo, you don't have permission to use that. Yeah, you have to be like, that's such a good point. I mean, even now with people with like Apple TV and Amazon, all that, like if you buy a movie, you don't own it the way that people tend to think they own their photos, right? Like you can't just reproduce that and send it to other people. And honestly, like I think that there is a technicality on if some point like Apple decides they're not allowed to host it anymore, well then like you might have
well,
paid
you
$20
see this
first.
Yeah. I mean, like you see it firsthand in Amazon and Amazon Prime and Netflix, right? Where it will say like leaving soon because their usage license for that video, for that movie has gone away. And right. And then it's like all of a sudden you see it over on Netflix. You're like, oh, that was on Amazon. Now it's on Netflix. Right. Because they switched services. So there's really concrete like examples in the real world that you can tell people and then they go, oh, right. Yeah, like I get that. And you're like, it works the same with images.
Yep. It's a bit of an uphill battle we're fighting on this because people are just so used to this idea that like but I paid for them and they're mine. And like, I don't know why they do not see it that way, but we must continue to do it. We have to continue to educate people. And I think that in general, as much as you can maintain a positive or hopeful or optimistic attitude about it all and just look at it as like, they're not out to get you. They just don't understand. And so the more you can stay focused on finding a compromise, a solution, on educating, on being grateful that they, there was something about your work that they were excited about in the first place, maintaining a focus on that, I think will help you get to a solution better. And at the end of the day, it might just be a no, but if you are treating them with respect and kindness and not getting like catty with them because you feel so offended, then because people are genuinely afraid to do that. The number of times that I've quoted someone, they've come back and been like, my budget is so much lower than that, and I would not want to offend, you and like your talent by like asking you to work within the budget I have in mind. So don't worry about it. And I'm like, well, first of all, can you at least just tell me? Because there might be a different solution. It actually drives me nuts. I so appreciate it, but it is like, just freaking tell me. So then again, we can try to find something that works. But yeah, it's like if you just maintain this, like treating people with, all right, no problem, I get it. They may very well come back to you in the future when they do have budget or when they've thought of a solution or they've changed it up. So yeah.
Yeah, and if you want to dive into this further and understand usage more, we do have a live class coming May 12th. Yay. Lauren and I will be there to host it. Lauren will be doing a deep dive into her case study about the company we just talked about, where we had the producer come in and have to pick the images. But we'll be talking about what happened on the backside where usage really came into play again, and we had to figure out some new usage licensing. And what that looked like and all of the back and forth and the actual email that was sent. And we actually will have a second guest coming. Rachel Kornack will be coming to talk about this very exciting shoot where it was all happening up front before it all happened, how all the terms and conditions kind of changed within 48 hours or even 24 hours before her shoot. Wow. And what happened on the usage front and how they did make, I'll leave you hanging. Did they make it? Did they make it happen? Did they not make it happen?
I want to know.
And so you'll have to come for the live session to find out what happened. But all of that information is in the show notes. The tickets are currently on sale. It's $97. It also comes with a 14-page workbook with a lot of the stuff that Lauren and I were just talking about. And there's a little coupon for those on the newsletter. So you got to hop over to that newsletter. There will be one more newsletters going out. Yeah. The 4th is when the coupon expires.
So get on the newsletter if you're not on it.
And so all the links to the workshop, to the newsletter, to the Instagram are all in the show notes below.
Right on. Shelly, always fun.
Always fun. Thanks for coming and sitting at the fire with me, Lauren.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.